All right. Let's get levels. We good here, guys? Hi. Hi. So I'm going to start a podcast, and I'm going to start it mostly because Donald Trump is president right now, and I think that's incredibly fucking stupid. Now, don't get me wrong. I thought it would be really fucking stupid if Hillary was president. I thought it was stupid that Obama was president. So if you're looking for somebody to back up your claims or your feelings about the last guy or this guy or what we're doing as a country, this isn't going to be the podcast for you. I thought a lot about what to call it. I think I'm going to call it The King is Dead. Because honestly, what it's going to be about is how we as a country are literally letting ourselves fall back into the habit of having kings and rulers. You could see it with the last president, and you can especially see it with this president. People don't seem to really want to be free anymore. It seems to frighten them. So we had a president that really wasn't that free. Honestly, Obama did a lot of things that I don't think were that freeing. I don't think he gave people a lot of freedom because honestly, it's not something you can give away. It's something as a people you take. You take freedom. You don't just get it. It's not given to you. It's not manna from heaven. So, what we have in this country right now specifically is a cult of the presidency. We think and we focus all of our efforts, and again, not everybody, but a majority of us seem to focus our efforts on the president because we think the president is going to change our lives. It's going to make our lives better. And so we keep trusting him more and more and more. And it's become very partisan, which is really incredibly stupid. And I'm sorry if you don't like hearing these kind of coarse, vulgar words like stupid and fuck, but this is going to be an all ages podcast with a lot of swearing in it because I honestly think it might be important for children to learn this stuff too. And children swear. So we have Donald Trump as president, and honestly, I didn't think it would be this crazy this soon. Um, I thought there'd be a grace period. I thought he would ramp up to autocracy. Nope, full bore autocracy right from the beginning. You know, I didn't expect it. I'm almost kind of, oh, I don't know, surprised, proud. Like it's that scene in Anchorman where I'm like, I'm not even mad. I'm just amazed. If you want to know how you're feeling right now about Donald Trump, like if you hate Donald Trump, if you think what he's doing is unconstitutional or evil, or any of those things, which I think a lot of people seem to think, then I want you to think about how I feel. And this is very important. I think this is an important concept to kind of grasp in your head. How you feel about Donald Trump right now is how I felt for the last 16 years. Every day, I felt the same anger you're feeling to Donald Trump for executive overreach that I felt for the last 16 years. Why? Well, because I don't really have a lot of respect for the powerful. I'm a little bit punk rock, I'm a little bit anti authority, and I don't see power as anything other than something you're given. You don't earn power. People don't earn power. You're given power. This is why when you look at corporations and companies, those people don't earn power, they're given it. But at the same time, it can easily be taken away. If you run your business into the ground, all that power that your customers gave you is taken away. Now, without getting into the economics of it, there are times, and we subsidize and corporate welfare and stuff, where the power is actually given by people who can't take it away. That's a problem. That's for a later podcast. So, On the King is Dead. I want to get one thing clear and I want to get one thing really straight. And since we're on the topic of power, and this is going to be kind of a stream of consciousness thing, I really want to understand, I want you to understand, as the listener, or as someone who dislikes me, or as someone who thinks I'm insane, or someone who thinks I'm incredibly liberal, or somebody thinks I'm incredibly conservative, because I've seen it both ways. I've had people tell me, you're way too liberal. I've had people tell me, you are way too conservative. So I can't win. I can't win for losing. Whoever you elected, I probably would have started this podcast anyway, but boy, did you impress me by electing Donald Trump. Once again, it's not like I'm mad. I'm amazed you did it. I didn't think you would. I, I really didn't. I was sitting here, mouth agape, on the floor, like, wow, wow. You really don't get it. I mean, I know why it happened. You don't like Democrats, so you elected Donald Trump. I think it's fun to annoy Democrats. I have no problem annoying Democrats. Trolling Democrats is one of my pastimes. I like trolling Republicans too, but now that he's been elected, I think you kind of have to take a step back and be like, okay, we've had our fun. Now it's time to actually be serious and be adults about this. And I don't see that. I see people retreating to their corners, and that's weird. So I want to talk about when we start here. And the first thing I want to get out is why I dislike power. Because I think people have the wrong idea. People think power in the right hands could be used to do a lot of good. No, it can't. So I want to read you a quote, and it's an incredibly famous quote. And you might not know who said it, but I'm going to explain to you who said it. So the quote is, power tends to corrupt. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And people say that quote and they say, well, I mean, yeah, if the wrong people have power, but if the right people have power, then it's not corrupting. Except the problem is nobody gives back power. And when you have a revolving door of presidents, even if the last guy you really like, you thought he used his power for good things, somebody else is going to have that power one day. And they're not going to give it back. Power needs to be taken back. It's why we have revolutions in the world. It's why we've had uprisings. Because eventually a government gets so powerful that the people say, "Oh, no, we're done with you. We are completely and utterly done with you, and we're taking the power back." And lately, people have just been giving up power in everything. But what I want to do, because I think people take this quote out of context, this quote was written by, and I want to get his name right, because it's an amazing name, John Emmerich Edward Dalberg Lord Acton. That's a name, huh? Anyway, he was a historian, actually, around the 1830 to 1900 range there. I think that's when he lived. He lived for a long time back then. He's an old guy. So he wrote this in 1887. And the reason he wrote this is because it was part of a letter to a bishop. Now, remember, he was a historian. So when he looked at history, he was trying to do it honestly, which doesn't really happen a lot. People look at history and they say, the winners write history, right? History is written by the winners, and that is fairly true. Look at the way we look at history. Um, we, as Americans, and I'm an American, and I grew up with the school model of history that we have, we absolutely just adore presidents. Every president did something good, according to what I learned in American history books. Like, everyone was just great. Even the kind of spurious ones, they're like, oh, they were great. Teddy Roosevelt was amazing. FDR was great. Woodrow Wilson was the amazingest thing ever. Abraham Lincoln, oh my God. We ignore the fact that two of the presidents on that list had internment camps, FDR and Lincoln. Two of our most decorated presidents had internment camps. So a bishop wrote to Acton, if I'm getting the story right, and he said he thought maybe Acton was being too harsh on popes, because he was writing about kings and popes at the time. There wasn't really a whole lot of history, at least from about 400 AD to about 1776, of people being elected to office. So most of history is kings and popes. So he was harsh on popes. Specifically, this was about the Inquisition. And the bishop Creighton felt that Acton was being a little too hard on the popes. He's like, well, they were popes. You hear this about Obama, and you hear this about some other presidents, where people will say, well, it's hard. They have to make tough decisions. And if they do bad things, I mean, that's just part of the office. They've all done bad things, and it's something we should accept. And this is where I want to read the entire quote for you. I'm going to do my best to read it. So here we go. But this is the whole, again, stream of consciousness. This is going to be like the whole paragraph of what he wrote. And I'm going to read it all the way down to the end of this paragraph. So, but if we might discuss this point until we found that we nearly agreed, and if we do argue thoroughly about the impropriety of Carlyle denunciations and Pharisaism in history, I cannot accept your canon that we are to judge Pope and King unlike other men, with a favorable presumption that they did no wrong. If there is any presumption, it is the other way against holders of power, increasing as the power increases. Historic responsibility has to make up for the want of legal responsibility. Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Great men are almost always bad men, even when they exercise influence and not authority. Still more when you superadd the tendency or the certainty of corruption by authority. There is no worse heresy than that the office sanctifies the holder of it. That is the point at which the negation of Catholicism and the negation of liberalism meet and keep high festival, and the end learns to justify the means. You would hang a man of no position like Ravaillac, but if what one hears is true, then Elizabeth asked the gaoler to murder Mary, and William III ordered his Scots minister to extirpate a clan. Here are the greater names coupled with the greater crimes. You would spare these criminals for some mysterious reason. I would hang them higher than Hammond for reasons of quite obvious justice, still more, still higher, for the sake of historical science. I love this paragraph so much because it is a historical mic drop. It is the most historical mic drop you will ever hear in your life. And it is amazing. The entire letter is amazing. If you look it up at, I think oll.libertyfund.org is where I'm reading it from, but you could just Google Lord Acton letters to Bishop Clayton. The whole letter is just a mic drop. It is the nicest rebuttal to anybody questioning you I have ever read, and it is thoroughly eviscerating of his point of view. But let's really look at what Acton said here, because I think it's really important. So he starts off. I cannot accept your canon that we are to judge Pope and King unlike other men with a favorable presumption that they did no wrong. That's really important, because I think in modern society, we want to believe that our heroes, the people we vote for, the people we love, have done no wrong, that if some wrong is attached to them, it must be because of some superseding principle or idea that something else happened. I think it's important that we don't. It's important that we judge these people based on what they did. And if they do something wrong, you have to call them out for it. Because if you don't, then you are simply relegating yourself to the status of essentially a worshiper. You're saying that this person is above you. This person is better than you. And as our as a Declaration of Independence said, all men are created equal. As much as people want to wring the founders through the dirt, and hey, I got no problem with that. Slave owners, rich white men, I get it. But the phrase itself, the idea, is a high concept one. All men are created equal. You are kings to yourself. And Acton, from a historical bent, said that you have to judge these people for what they did. You have to hold them accountable, because while they lived, while they were alive, they were not held accountable. And as historians, our job is to correct that. Our job is to look back and say, you know what? They were wrong. They were wrong, and we are going to tell you that they are wrong. Later in the letter, he goes on to say it should discredit them. One act of absolute, absurd obscenity discredits every good thing you did. For all the good things you might think FDR did, he had internment camps for Japanese Americans. That's not something you can really get over. You know, it's like this. If you're beating your wife and you stop beating your wife and you start treating her really nice, you don't just get credit for treating her nice. You still have to be held accountable for all the times you beat her. You don't get an automatic reprieve. You may be able to be forgiven, maybe. But in that case, I have a hard time believing that, but maybe. But you don't. Anyway, let's look on to what he said now. If there is a presumption, it is the other way around against holders of power, increasing as the power increases. Historically, the most powerful people who have ever lived have been the worst, the killingest. You look at dictators, you look at Hitler, you look at Stalin, Pol Pot, people with absolute power who use that power to do absolutely terrible things. Now, people say, well, they misused their power. The fact of the matter is they had that power. There's the problem, because if they don't get to that power, then the most they can do is some very minor damage to society. It's power that damages. Now, historic responsibility has to make it for the want of legal responsibility. I talked about that. Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Now, just because power corrupts doesn't mean it makes you a bad person, but it has a corrupting influence. Now, I don't want to get, again, too much into economics or whatever, but look at things that politicians do that you might agree with. Um, Individual mandate. I don't want to bring up Obamacare. That's a whole different discussion. But an individual mandate basically says you must do something, or from you will be removed time or money or whatever. You'll have to do something. And this will be generally against your will. Now, you might say that the reasons are right, that the ends justify the means. But in the end, that's still kind of corrupt, telling somebody that they have to do something, or else, even with the best intentions, is corrupting. It damages morality, it damages justice. And over time, the scars that those kinds of things leave don't really heal. You know, they don't. They eradicate trust in power. And to me, that's good, but you have to really think about what you're getting into when you're passing laws, because you're going to eventually hurt somebody with them. Look at our prison population. So power tends to corrupt. Great men are almost always bad men. I think that's incredibly important. And that's the part people leave out of the power tends to corrupt, because it's the very next sentence. And it's really important because, as I said about some of our former presidents and even some historical kings, from a very personal ground level view of justice, if any of us plebes here on the ground, were to act like president or king or any of these people, we would be either beaten or run out of town or just ignored. Or, I mean, there's not a ton that really makes up for how we act as a society, or how we would act if we were doing the things that these people do. I can't fly a drone up to Canada and blow something up. I just can't. I don't have that kind of power. And I don't think anybody should necessarily have that kind of power. It's part of the problem with the nation state as it is that we entrust far too much power into far too few people. And then we say, well, it'll be fine. It'll be fine because we're a democracy or whatever else, because we have a parliament or because we have a constitution. And the fact of the matter is, it's not. If you're not forever vigilant of government, then there's really no point of having government. Because if you're not vigilant, all you're having is a different kind of monarchy. You're still having a ruling class. You're just trading one kind of ruling class for another kind of ruling class. There is no worse heresy than that the office sanctifies the holder of it. And he was talking about popes and kings, but I think the same thing can be said of presidents, especially President Trump. Just because he's president doesn't mean it's good. Same thing about Obama. I once saw a meme that somebody posted on Facebook that basically said, you might not like Obama, but he's the president and you have to deal with it. And I'm like, that's not the point. The office of president, there's nothing special about the office of president. There's nothing mystical about it. There's nothing historically unique about it. There's nothing handed down from heaven about it. It's just a guy. Now, it's a guy we've given way, way too much power, and that's what I'm trying to get across. Because these executive orders are nothing new. Presidents have had the right. Now, most of them haven't really abused it. The modern abuse of the executive order kind of started with Bush. They existed before that, but the way in which they were just devilishly used really didn't really get bad until we got to our current regime. The last 18 years, really, that I've been really mad about, have been really bad in terms of abuse of power. So he says the ends learn to justify the means. That's what's happening now. People are upset that they don't have jobs, and people are upset that they don't feel in control of their lives. So I don't want to say that this is racism or xenophobiaism, because while that is true, that plays into it, but it's just kind of a sense of nationalism, which I don't think is healthy. And that's on both sides of the aisle. Bernie Sanders said, while he was running for office, as good as you may think he is, he said freer immigration or open borders are a conspiracy to drive down wages. People are always, sadly, siding with their country first, regardless of what the means are for them to get where they want. People want more jobs, so they say, you can't come here. And the way I want to explain borders to you is incredibly, incredibly simple. And I think it was no, it was Michael Humer, a philosopher, who wrote a really good book, The Problem of Political Authority, which I would recommend. It's an interesting look at the social contract theory in a modern society and why it might not be as special as you think it is. Um, but he uses an example. He says, you have a person, Starvin Marvin. He uses that from South Park, because South Park is great and is hilarious. And I wish they were airing episodes right now because it'd be amazing. And he said, you have this person, Starvin Marvin. Let's say he lives in Mexico and he wants to go to the marketplace, which is in America, because he's starving and he needs a job. And there's jobs. There's jobs. Let's not even call it America and Mexico. Let's say, let's call it country A and country B. So he lives in country A and he wants to go to country B and get a job because there really aren't any good jobs in country A, but there's a lot of good jobs in country B. So he wants to go to country B and get a job. And if he doesn't get a job in the next week, he will die. He will die. He will starve to death. No one will help him unless he gets a job, and he will die. Now, what you're doing is, both Democrats and Republicans, because you both basically are saying the same thing about immigration, just in different ways. Refugees are different, but immigration, different ways. You're saying the same thing. You're basically putting guards and saying, you can't come here, you can't get a job, turn around and starve. Maybe that's a simplistic way to look at things, but there's a difference between having a barrier for entry that a person could conceivably get around, which we don't. Maybe Marvin would have to, I don't know, talk to somebody for an hour, or he'd have to be detained for a couple hours while he did a background check. It's fine, whatever. But it's not the same thing as saying, well, we've already let 100 people in. We can't really let another one. So turn around and starve. You now have condemned that person to death, regardless of whether or not there's a nation state or regardless of anything else. You've said to that person, it's better you die than you come to our country. That's dangerous and unjust and immoral. So the point I'm getting at here is that I'm glad everybody's starting to come around to it, because it's been a while that I've kind of been on an island here. There's been a few other people on this island, but mostly I've been on an island where people are like, well, I think it's good to use power to do good things. Even when you use power to do good things, you're still using power. Power has a corrupting influence. It just does. Historically, this has always happened. Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, in a sense, is about the same thing. Person gets too powerful, so everyone kills him. Am I saying that should happen? No. Don't go around killing people just to get your way. It usually doesn't turn out too well. Kill him morally, yeah, sure. Kill his ideas, and kill them for the right reasons, though. Don't just dislike Trump because you don't like his politics. Don't just dislike Obama because you dislike his politics. If you're doing that, you're shifting the blame. Because the point is, these people, these miniature embryoed god kings that we're creating, are just going to end up abusing that power eventually. Because what's after Trump? Are we going to elect a guy that gives back all the power that Trump's gonna assimilate to the office, assuming he ever lets himself get voted out? Is that going to happen? Even if it's a Democrat, even if it's a liberal, I mean, do you think that next person is going to give that power back? No. Now they're just going to have more power. And then the guy after that is probably going to have more power. And then we dissolve the republic. So, I mean, think about why you don't like what Trump's doing. If you think there should be refugees and you think the president should have power, I think you're looking at it the wrong way because the point is you shouldn't have the right to do this. It's not up to him. It's up to us. We were a country founded on individual liberty, and I still hold fast to that. I think that's incredibly important. I think people see that there are problems with individual liberty, fine, but I never pretended it was utopian. I don't think it's something that is supposed to be utopian. What it is making the best out of what could be a bad situation. Because we've tried a lot of other things. People say, I think it was Winston Churchill said, democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others that have been tried. And that's true. There's nothing special about democracy. We were just told that in school. You know, having one master or having 10,000 masters or having 450 masters, they're still masters. You're still having one or two or three or 400 people telling you how you can and can't live your life. It's the reason we've always had issues socially with getting social justice because we think the government is what gives us social justice. Like people will say, and this has always blown my mind, people will say, well, the government freed the slaves. No, they didn't. People freed the slaves. The government just said it wasn't okay to have slavery anymore. They set it up in the first place, though. Again, to go back to the abusive relationship, if you beat your wife for 10 years and then one day say, oh, I'm just not going to beat my wife anymore, you shouldn't get credit because you stopped beating your wife. You should be held accountable for the fact that you beat your wife for 10 years. It's the same thing with, rights to vote or social justices or all the other stuff. People say, well, the government ended segregation. The government instituted segregation. If the government didn't institute segregation, there wouldn't have been segregation. Oh, sure, no. Individually, people might still have chosen not to associate with certain people, but there wouldn't have been institutionalized, mandated segregation, which was worse than the alternative. I'm glad the government finally wised up and said, oh, wait a minute. We take it back. I mean, look what they did with prohibition. They enacted prohibition, then they repealed it. I don't think they should get credit for repealing it. They enacted it in the first place. They helped create all the monsters that came from that. I guess what I'm saying is the government, the powerful, are very short sighted. And they have to be. They have to be because we have a system which says in order to get power and in order to stay in power, you have to please people. People are fickle and people don't know what they're talking about. I'm not saying that in a bad way. If you specialize in something, you probably know what you're talking about. People don't specialize in politics. You don't have an individual saying, like, I'm a master of politics. I know everything that is happening. People know bits and pieces. They don't really know enough to make an informed decision. So I think voting is overrated. You don't know enough to make an informed decision. You can't possibly know enough. It's impossible. Because you have a job, and you have friends, and you like looking at porn, and you like playing video games, and you like smoking pot. You know, you have other interests. There are 24 hours in a day. You can't spend the requisite 5 hours a day learning everything there is to learn about every vote and the effects of every vote in politics. You can't. I mean, so people vote on very, very simple, very easy to grasp ideas like, well, there's no jobs. We want more jobs. Are you going to try to give us more jobs? Well, then I like you. But it's a very simplistic way of looking at it. I think the moment for me, I was like 22 years old. I'm 35 now because I'm so very old. 35 is the new 60. It feels like 35. I think I was 22 and I realized like I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. I still don't think I know what I'm talking about. That's why I'm doing this. I'm trying to point out that you probably don't know what you're talking about. Full disclosure. I mean, be that kind of honest. And you know what? It's okay to not know what you're talking about. You should try to learn more about what you're talking about, but don't act like you have the answers, like you know everything, you know, because you don't. And I don't think I do either. I'm trying to point out that we need to get away from this power model of government. This model where we invest power, we kind of have to start doing things ourselves. It's time to stand upright. It's time to walk. We have finally, I think, reached a point in society where we don't really need as much government. We have so much freedom right now with the internet and the ease at which we can access all the information that has ever existed, like on our phones. Like I was reading that quote from my phone. We are living in the future. It is a technological wonderland, an absolute technological wonderland that we live in. I just mean, what's going on that we think we need even more government when honestly, it's time for less? No, again, I'm not saying that you need to throw it all off right away, but think about it. Think about what really makes you happy. And it's probably going to be the arts of some kind. And I use that term broadly. I characterize video games and movies, even really crappy ones, as arts. They're things that bring you joy. We have long form television now that has never existed, and it's amazing. It's so good. And that's brought about by creative freedom. And it's brought about by bringing different ideas from different people from around the world together, different ways of looking at things. And it's amazing. So really focus on what makes you happy. And politics doesn't make you happy. It makes you sad. It makes you miserable. So I think we need kind of just a lot less government. You might disagree. You might think we need more. You might think some people need to be controlled. I think the problem is the control. Too much. Again, I'm a little bit punk rock. I don't like control. I like being made to feel uncomfortable. I enjoy that. It makes me question myself. It makes me say maybe this is bad. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. Maybe this is an emotion I need to expand upon further, which is why I'm doing this. So, I mean, just check this out. I'm going to end it here. It's been about 33 minutes. I've just been kind of going off on a tangent. And I think that's going to be the common concept for this. It's just going to be tangential. It might not always be truly political related, but I wanted to get my thoughts out there on the concept of power and how it has a corrupting influence and how we really have to realize as a society and as a people that it's power that's the enemy. It's not particularly Donald Trump. It's not particularly Barack Obama. It's not particularly, you know, all these different people. It's the power that they have and that they really shouldn't. We need to take that away. So again, so this will be a bit of a freeform podcast. I'm going to try to release this weekly maybe, I'm thinking. And we'll see how it goes. I'll make a Twitter account, share it on Facebook. You guys can let me know what you think. If you don't like me, I get that. I do. I get it. If you do like me, or if you do agree, try to do it for the right reasons. Don't hold me too high for that. I try to think of everything in a very principled way. Like, can we solve this particular problem with more freedom instead of less? Maybe I'm full of shit, but again, stream of consciousness. This is how I think. And look up Lord Acton, historian. Never finished any great histories. At his death, one of his friends said his ability to think critically prevented him from actually doing a lot of writing. He started writing his histories, but he never finished. He died before they were completed. And basically, he was always just locked in thinking all the time. And I think that's an incredible way to kind of live life. Like, try to think all the time. All the time. Why? Just ask why. So anyway, this has been the King is Dead podcast. My name is Steven. And yeah, come back and check me out. If you like the rant, if you don't like the rant, check me out anyway. Share me with your friends. Tell them that they must listen to this. This guy makes sense. Or they must listen to this. This guy is a maniac. That's fine too. Anyway, thanks for listening.